welcome to the first episode of Fauxrarri Motorsports. So you want to be a race car driver. This episode is technically episode 0, considering we're going to go over what the basics of the series is. However, we will get into a little bit of information about some of the first steps you need to take before you can go motorsports racing. This is a series of videos that is designed for the average person. We're going to try to keep the technical jargon to a minimum, or when we do need to use it, we'll explain what it means. And this is really for somebody who has contemplated getting into motorsports, but they might be completely lost as to where to begin. This subject is a big and intimidating one when you look at it in its entirety, so we will be breaking it down into small, actionable pieces that will make it far easier to decide what you want to do and if you even want to do it in the first place. So, that being said, this series is going to be focused more towards what is known as the amateur level of racing. That doesn't mean that these people are amateurs by any sense of the term. It just means that they're not considered at a professional level, with the word professional itself simply meaning that's how you make your living. That's all professional means. There are a lot of very talented, very capable racers at the lower levels of motorsports, and a lot of them could be professionals, or they might have once been professionals. And even that term professional level is a misnomer, because there's a lot of teams that are at that level that are self-funded. They don't have corporate sponsors. That's not their day job. A lot of them do still have day jobs, or they own and run companies. And it's just an absolute, it's just a divider class. It's just a divider term, basically, to give some appreciation for the level of difficulty that class or that level of motorsports presents. There is one other note that I have to make before we begin this series, as some of you might be wanting to know why we don't do a comprehensive breakdown of every type of racing that we mention. It's for the simple fact that it's impossible. At this point in time, there are so many sanctioning bodies, so many rule sets, and they change fast. The rule set that we'll be using for our series, the Champ Car BCCR Basic Club and Competition rules, has already had a major revision to some of the suspension rules. And they were just with days into 2020, and they've already made a pretty big revision. So just due to that fact, this is a basic guide. We will make it as comprehensive as possible, but it is not going to be specific. Anything that is specifically mentioned will come from the BCCR for Champ Car Endurance Series, because that's the series that we're going to be racing under. Now, one other thing I want to mention, just to get this out there, kind of full disclaimer, I do have some experience at what would be considered a professional level of drag racing as a crew member on a couple of different cars. I'm also a fairly average guy. I have a day job, I got a mortgage, I got bills to pay. So this is not some rich guy pretending to be an average guy. I really am average. This series of videos is mainly just to prove that the average guy can get into something like this. Not necessarily by himself, maybe a group of his buddies decides to get together. But that's kind of the whole point, and as I stated at the beginning of the video, why we're focusing on the more amateur level, just for the simple fact is that's where we're at. That's where we're starting from. We don't have a whole lot of money to do this. I mean, we've got a little bit, but we've got a fairly tight budget, and we're just a bunch of people that love racing, and we want to give it a shot ourselves. And we're going to document this whole process so that you can, if nothing else, follow along and come on our adventure with us. So you want to be a race car driver. Awesome. Great. But do you know where to start? Well, we're going to help you out with that. first thing we need to determine is what kind of racing do you want to do. There are so many sets of rules, so many sanctioning bodies, and so many types out there that we can't make that decision for you. We can throw a few out so that you know where to begin your research. One of the most popular ones, one of the most best known, is quarter mile drag racing. However, they also do eighth mile drag racing, where some quarter mile tracks do eighth mile when the cars get too fast for their shutdown areas, which is the length of pavement that the car has to slow down to a safe speed to make the return trip back to the starting line. Do you want to do heads up drag racing, which is basically you build the biggest, baddest car that you can and you put it up against the biggest, baddest car that the other guy built. Now, there are a lot of rules and restrictions to keep the speeds down or try to keep some kind of parity so that you're running relatively close and the guy with the biggest wallet doesn't have to win every time. Do you want to do bracket racing, where you build a car to run a certain time and then you tell the track, hey, my car's going to run 10:20s, 10 seconds, 10.2 seconds. Then they'll dial the tree in and say, okay, this guy over here says he's going to run 8 flat. Now, the tree has to have 2.2 seconds of delay in it for that guy running 8 seconds to try to have a fair race. Now, these cars might not necessarily run that flat out. They might have strategies to slow the cars down so that they have a little extra, or they can fake out the guy that's chasing them down. But we won't get into that series. That's a whole other bag of worms. I mean, you go to any of these tracks at the so-called amateur level, there's a lot of science and a lot of really smart people there. So maybe you want to do road racing like we're doing. We're doing endurance road racing. There's different levels and sanctioning bodies, all the way from Champ Car and Lemons all the way up to FIA, IMSA, Pirelli World Challenge. We're choosing to do Champ Car just for the ease of accessibility and the relative inexpensiveness to get on track. Now, does that necessarily mean we'll be competitive? Yes, actually, surprisingly, because it doesn't matter how much money you dump into the car if it can't last the race. Average champ car race is 7 to 8 hours. If you can't make the car last that long at high speed track conditions, then it doesn't matter if you dumped $100,000 or $1 million into it. So that's part of the reason why we selected endurance racing. Other forms of motorsport out there are tractor pulling, where it's basically you hook a truck or a tractor up to a load, and they actually have some really sophisticated mechanisms so that you start with a light load and the load gets heavier as you go down the track, and you basically just see how far you can pull it. That's another real popular one. A lot of popular ones for county fairs are demolition derbies, where you basically build a car to protect the driver and ram into each other and see which car lasts the longest. All different kinds of racing available: heads up drag racing, endurance road racing. Maybe you want to do something where you're not on track with another guy. You can do time attack. You can do time trials, where cars leave at specified intervals and the person who has the fastest time to the end point or around the track or whatever the goal might be is the winner. The point being that there's just so much variety out there in the world of motorsports that in order for this series to be successful, we have to kind of stay focused on what we are doing as a team. So we are doing endurance road racing. We are racing with Champ Car Endurance Series for ease of access and the relative inexpensiveness of getting into the sport. Now, don't get me wrong. We're probably still going to spend between $10,000 and $15,000 to get on track all in. So when I say inexpensive, this is not something that you're going to go spend $50 on. But we're not going to be spending $100,000. We're not going to be spending, $1 million. We don't have a fancy transporter. We don't have a huge operation. This is something that is in the realm of possibility for an average person or a group of friends. So that's a big part of the reason why we selected this style of racing. Drag racing can be even cheaper. Depending on the car you start with and how fast you're going, you might only need a couple $1,000s in safety upgrades and whatnot, which we'll get into that in another video. Alright, next topic for this video. We've decided what kind of racing we want to do. We're doing endurance road racing. Next thing that comes up is usually car selection. A lot of people decide that, hey, I'm a Ford guy, I'm going to race a Mustang or a Thunderbird or a Fairlane. A Chevy guy might race a Corvette, a Camaro, a GTO, if you're a Pontiac guy. Or if you got something weird you want to race. Some guys race S10s. Other guys race bigger trucks. Some people, they start out with what they have. The Ferrari, the carcass, cost us a whole whopping $100. Even less if you consider the parts that we sold off of some other parts cars that we had acquired. And we just had it lying around when we decided that we were going to do this project. Other people will go out and they'll pick cars that they know are competitive. Mazda Miatas are popular road racing cars just because they are basically factory race cars. BMWs are real popular and competitive. And you see a lot of those out and about just because their suspension is already fairly well tuned. They have fairly large gas tanks. And a lot of, not all, but a lot of podium cars recently in the last few years had been BMWs that I have seen and heard of. Now, another reason that we decided to stick with a Pontiac Fiero, a mid-engine car, is there's a few driving characteristics that are unique to the MR platform that we're hoping to be able to take advantage of. It's a little some of them are a little counterintuitive, but overall, from what I've researched and read, they're fairly successful track cars once they're upgraded. They'll at least go the distance, and everybody that I know has fun driving. As you can see, motorsports racing is a vast topic. There are all kinds of different racing, there's different rules, and just a lot to go over. Some of the other topics that we'll be going over in future videos will include personal safety, car safety equipment, rules compliance, and how to read a rule book, which is fairly simple. If you've read any kind of rule book for anything, you pretty much got the idea. Some rule books are more complex than others. Another reason why we chose Champ Car, relatively straightforward rules set, very easy to read and understand once you know what you're looking at. Some other topics that we'll cover will be tools and equipment and transportation to and from. And it's not just transportation for the car. If you have a team like we at Fauxrarri Motorsports are going to build, you have to get your other drivers there, you have to get your crew members there. Of course, you have to get the car to the track. And there's plenty of other topics that we will cover. It's just a vast array that needs to be contemplated, especially for a more time-intensive, more focused effort like we are going to be putting forward. So that's going to about do it for this video today. As always, we encourage you to become a member of the team by subscribing to the channel, liking us on Facebook, turn on your notification button, like our videos, let us know if you have anything you'd like us to talk about in the future. As I said before, motorsports, big topic. I'm probably going to miss something. So if there's something that is important that you want to know about or you think that I missed, please let me know in the comments below. And, as always, we appreciate your support and helping us make our mission of turning miles into smiles a reality.